Nonprofit.
Well, that song means we are doing another episode here with your friend, the nonprofit sector connector, Tommy D, coming at you from my attic. And that song means it's philanthropy and focus time. And what do we focus on here? I have a mission. I am on a mission to do two things each week with you. It is to tell the story, or at least help tell the story, and amplify the message for the nonprofit leaders and their organizations that we feature on the show. I tell you this all the time, that nonprofits change our world every moment of every hour of every day of every month of every year. Nonprofits change and impact our world. They serve incredibly well to people who need the service, whether it's an agency working in the mental health space, whether it's an agency that's doing work with the intellectually and developmentally disabled, empowering young people. There's so much that the nonprofit sector is bringing to us. Today's organization, post-tour processing, is no different and makes an incredible impact for first responders, police officers, and other first responders. So we're going to get right into this conversation. There's a couple of things that I want to do before we even dive into the conversation. I just want to remind you that the New York City Imagine Awards applications are out right now. So if you're connected to and or serve on a board of a nonprofit organization, if you run a nonprofit organization that touches or works with people in the 5 boroughs of New York City, or you're located in the 5 boroughs of New York City, all 5 boroughs, not just Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx and Manhattan, Staten Island as well. All 5 boroughs are part of New York City in the Imagine Awards. That's a little nod and a wink to my friends over in Staten Island. All right, so here's the thing. Let's dive into this conversation right away. Robin Canariotto is here. Gene Cirillo is here. And I've been pronouncing Robin that name, or I've been practicing pronouncing that name for like a week, because I did a video the other day. I think I told you this over the phone. I did a video the other day and I could not get the word out right. So this morning I wrote it out. I wrote it the way I think it's supposed to sound. So first of all, welcome to the show. Welcome to my attic. How are you both today?
I'm fine. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Gene. Robin?
I'm fine too, Tommy, and you absolutely pronounced my name perfectly. Perfectly.
Thank you. I've had a
So
week.
thank you.
It's been a week since I swear to you, I did this video, everybody, and I go, Canna, and I could not get the word out. So anyway, it's
a
never
tough
at a
one.
loss for words. Sometimes just I have lost in the ability to pronounce the words. But
Sound it out.
I know, sound it out, man. Phonics. It's like phonics, I had to
Yeah.
just break it down. All right, so really, let's dive into this conversation. Gene and I were talking before we got started here, and I know that you have both been practice partners for many years in the psychology space, but I think where it'd be okay if we could start, Robin, talk to me about the background, talk to me about NYPD, your experience there, and how that all culminates into what you and Gene do together, and specifically what goes on with the organization post-tour processing. Let's talk about it.
Thanks, Tommy. So I was a police officer in the NYPD, and I went through many roles as a police officer. I was a beat cop, I was an undercover cop, I was a peer counselor in the NYPD, and in the late '80s, I went to work in a unit that was predominantly a punitive unit. The purpose of the unit was to identify officers that had problems and to either begin termination or probation on them, at whatever points in their career they were at because of the behavior that they exhibited. And I specifically wanted to work in that unit because I believe that anybody who displayed behavior that was problematic probably had a problem that was unidentified.
So if I could interrupt for a second. So the department would say these individuals had problems and the solution was to remove them from the job. And
Some of them, yes,
some of them.
it was called early termination and identification, early warning.
Okay.
And so I got assigned to this unit, and I went and I read all the folders on all the police officers that had been identified. And I went into the captain and I said to him, you have 203 charts here, and out of them, there are 197 people that I believe have problems. And I'd like to bring them in and interview them. And it was myself and two other newcomers, Chris Hetherington and Michael Perugia. Michael Perugia is still active. He's a sergeant in the NYPD, and he still works with early intervention, which is what we renamed the unit.
What was it called before that?
Early warning. It was the early warning, and it was for identification and termination of officers that had problems.
I mean, words have meaning, as we know, as I joked about trying to pronounce your name, but words have meaning, right? Early intervention, where we talk a lot about intervention in many aspects of our life, but now it's like there's a situation that needs support more so than elimination, right?
Yes. So actually, we went on to interview all of the officers that we had identified as potentially having problems. And simultaneously, we set up one of the office lines to be a helpline. And in 3 months, we had almost 900 cops come forward for help. It was unbelievable. Like,
this is above and beyond the 203 or the
yes,
197,
right.
So wow. So obviously and this is the 80s, right?
It was the 80s, and the suicide rate was very high back then. So NYPD was seeing a lot of officers commit suicide, and some were suicide homicides, and it was heartbreaking. So we went on this campaign to lecture at all roll calls around the city, and we started to ask the cops to come forward and ask for help, and to basically tell us how we could help and what their needs were. And we were really pioneers in the space that we were in. We wound up taking firearms from cops that were depressed or suicidal. We wound up holding them until they got help. It was somewhat of an informal process because nothing existed until we implemented it.
So prior to this, though, just if I could interrupt for a second, prior to this, what was the outlet, or what was the support system for these folks?
As it is now, there was a formal psychological services unit with psychologists. And at that time, I don't think there was social workers, but I think now they have social workers. They were civilian employees predominantly. And there was also an alcohol counseling unit. So if a cop had an alcohol problem, they could walk in and say, I really need help, and they would find a place to send them and get them treatment. But if there was depression or suicidal ideations, there hadn't been a peer program prior. So we implemented the first peer counseling program in the NYPD, myself and my two colleagues.
So there's two big things I want to take away from this, because it sounds like there was and I'm trying to not be negative in any way, but it wouldn't have been a service really until somebody showed challenges around alcohol abuse, right?
That was one piece that was already in existence, the alcohol counseling. That was a separate unit. They worked out of John Jay College, and they had some uniformed officers there that were offering help to any officer that had an alcohol problem. I actually worked there for a short time. I was brought in to lead that unit, and I wanted to return to early intervention. So it was a very temporary experience.
Why is it so important that, versus a civilian doing this support work, or having somebody who's been on the job like yourself, undercover, done the work, walk the beat? I mean, I think it seems obvious, but I want to hear if I'm right. Like, why is that so important that it's somebody who is supporting these folks who's been involved with the job?
So I think it's like any other part of life. If you're a peer, if you go through the same experience, you have empathy that's unique. And if you really could understand someone else's experience, I think that's how AA is built, right? On the concept of, it's pure support. The people that have been in that particular experience support each other, and they take each other forward in a very healthy way, right? So that was the idea that we implemented the peer counseling unit in the NYPD. We were police officers. We understood what it was like to have a bad tour. We understood what we were exposed to during our shifts. And, eventually, if you have enough exposure to negative situations that most people run away from, when the police run toward them,
Yeah.
at some point it takes its toll, and stress comes out in different ways. So we saw officers that had marriages failing, alcohol problems, gambling problems, just overload of stress where they were breaking down crying and they didn't know what to do, and they were afraid to come forward and get help from a
Yeah.
formal
Why?
unit.
I think I would expect that, especially in the '80s and stuff like that. Where I
Mhm.
mean, even and not to make it the '80s is such a long time ago, but it is.
It is.
It's 40 years ago we're
Right.
talking about, right? 30 or 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
So, and again, as we sit here in 2022, and we even in the last 3 years of life, the focus on the mental health conversation is I remember being cranky about how we're ending the stigma of mental health, and we certainly have not ended the stigma by any means, but we're chipping away at it. I really
Right.
feel like we're getting somewhere. So I'm just going to guess that police officers, right, who are strong and brave, and as you say, are responding to the things that civilians run away from. It's even more so. Is it a pride thing of coming forward, or it's just like you can't show weakness? Is that part of it too?
Well, I think that's part of it. And, people think of police officers analogous to veterans, war veterans, or active duty servicemen. But the real difference with cops is that they have to disintegrate themselves every day and
But they
return
can,
home.
because they're not in a combat zone, right?
Right.
They
Right.
go, they do the thing, they see these incredible. And when I shot the video, promoting this show, I said incredible because there's so many different meanings to that. They see this, and then they go home, and they got to go. They go to the Little League game, right?
Exactly.
Or they mow their lawn. So it's not, and they're in the civilian life again. That's got to be a heck of a challenge, right?
Well, so that's why so many of them are overprotective parents, and they could see what other people can't see. They see a car drive down the block and they're wondering if the car is there to commit a crime, right?
Yeah, well,
So
that's it. Oh, ever vigilant, right? Like, who I'm thinking
absolutely.
of? And again, maybe this is glamorized, but I think you both can, in being involved with law enforcement, uh, can tell me. But I'm seeing Stabler right now. I'm seeing Stabler from an SVU.
Yes.
Benson
Yes.
Stabler, and like he's got a daughter, and he's having, I know being protective of my own family, and I only know part of the horrors of this world. A couple weeks ago on the show, we had on an organization called I Empathize, and my buddy Sam Leibowitz, who's doing our executive producing duties right now, and I have talked about that show because it was about human trafficking, and it was about the
Interesting.
horrors, right, of human trafficking. And it's probably an organization that you should know as well, and we could talk about that. But like,
Thank you.
yeah, I almost didn't want to do the show because I didn't want to know some stuff. And as an adult human being, I was like scared. I'm being totally real and vulnerable. I was afraid to know this stuff because I do have a family. I do have children, and I wanted but I felt so strongly in how important it was to do it because we have to tell these stories. And that's a lot about what this network is all about. But I'm seeing,
It's wonderful.
yeah, again, I decided I was going to do this stuff, and then you got to kind of lean in and do the stuff. Sometimes you got to do the hard stuff, right? You got and put yourself out there. So with that, I remember Stabler on that show, where they saw horrific things, and then he has to go home and be a dad and be a husband,
Yes.
right?
Yes. But one of my wishes is to meet the actor and actress that star in that show, whether it's Olivia Hart,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mariska Hargitay, Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia
Exactly.
Benson. Yeah,
Yes, I would love
yeah.
to meet
We
them,
could
or
probably work that
Stabler.
out. I mean, we're in New York, we could probably figure that out. Shout out to the world. I always ask how we're going to connect things and what
Oh, that would be wonderful. I'd
Mariska
love to.
Hargitay, and I don't know what Stabler's name is,
Right.
but yeah, we'll have to work that. We're in, we're right here. They're right there. We'll figure that out. So, but we're going to go to a quick break. So I want to hold that thought. What were you going to talk about? So I remember we talked about it when we come back.
So I wanted to say that one of the things that we learned in working in early intervention was that every day we would be sent out to roll call. Cops would go out to roll call. They would come home, they'd put their civilian clothes back on, and they'd go back to their ordinary lives, right?
Right.
But as still as a police officer, because you're always active.
Right. You still are.
But they never had an opportunity to rewind that roll call. That roll call, that day at work stayed with them,
Right.
and
So
it became
just,
permanent.
but they had to like go be another person, right? So I want to leave it right there. Gene, we're going to get you in this conversation
Wonderful.
too,
Okay.
because that's exactly the thing that I understand what this does, right? Prior to this, to the solution that you're providing, they had to just take that trauma and that experience and just kind of put it in a little box, right? And it doesn't get dealt with. But I think there's a better answer, and I think that's what you're going to talk to me about when we come back. Isn't that right?
Thank you, Tommy. Yes,
Got it.
thank you.
All right,
With
well,
Jean's help, thank you.
yes, Gene is here.
Yes.
Robin is here. Gene is an attorney and a therapist as well, and we're going to hear from her as well. And her and Robin are in private practice together. The organization we're talking about today is called Post-Tour Processing. This is Philanthropy and Focus. Sam, take us to break. We'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
That's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to cut through the static, man. Just way through the static. A lot of static around these days. Push through it. Join me in the attic. Got to give a quick shout out to my friend Mike, who I would have never known Robin Canariotto unless Mike had said, you need to meet my friend. He's the nonprofit sector connector, and you need to tell the story of the impact your organization is making on this show. So shout out to Mike. Appreciate you, brother. My neighborhood friend who is looking out for both Robin and me, and then Gene and Robin are on the show today, and that's how we did this. It says right here, just because your tour has ended doesn't mean it's over. Police officers can be exposed to more traumas in a single tour than most civilians experience in a lifetime. More traumas in a single tour than most civilians experience in a lifetime. Wow. Talk to me about that, Gene and Robin, please.
Well, you know, what the police officer sees, you never know when you get called to a home, domestic violence, let's say it could be an argument. It could be the wife has been shot. I think Robin described something where a woman was so badly burned, they called her likely, meaning likely to die. And, you know, you have to remain calm. And for the tour itself, you have to be the stabilizing influence. If people are fighting, you have to break it up. Depending on your skills, if people are very, very ill or very badly hurt in an accident, you have to call the ambulance and get them what they need transported to a hospital. You have to be there on the scene of a fire to make sure that it's not arson. So there's all these things happen. And I love what Robin described as after the tour is over, you put your civilian clothes on and go home. Post-tour processing deals with this with what they call reverse roll call. You go through what you experienced during the day, and you're there with your peers and you help one another, so that this way it's processed. It's
So
not
that's the
built
word.
up.
That's the word, Gene.
Process.
Process. So that's in the title of the organization, where we have to process the experience, because to your point, they've elevated to some hero. I'm in the zone. I gotta be here. I gotta get this done. The activity that I need to bring forth I have to put everything else aside. Right. So in the moment, there is no processing not processing in a thoughtful, long drawn out way. Right. It's like high intensity adrenaline pumping. Right. It's not. So talk to me more about the processing.
The only processing that you're doing in the moment is saying, okay, assess the situation and decide what needs to be done. But there's no emotional processing. You keep that inside, and if you don't deal with it at the end of your tour or anonymously on the internet, which this post-tour processing allows for, it's going to stay with you, and it's going to not only carry over into your next tour that might be a completely different situation, but it's going to come home with you to your family. Every time a car comes down the block, like you said before, you're going to think, is this person going to commit a crime? Every time your child goes to the school, you think, is this day going to be a school shooting? Am I going to get that emergency call? And it seems more probable because you're the one who's called. Like Robin said, what most people run away from, you have to run toward. So after a while, it seems common.
It seems more common. Again, when I read that, first of all, I'm floored by it. So I'm going to say it again. Police officers can be exposed to more traumas in a single tour than a regular individual can see in their whole lifetime. So of course, just the amount, the volume of that coming at them, for I guess 3-4 tours a week, right? Depending on, how they work their schedules and whatnot, and that just being bombarded with that level of input.
So Tommy, I remember being a rookie cop and being assigned to Midtown South Precinct, which is known to be the busiest precinct in the world. And your first day at work, you're given a radio and you're identified as a sector, you're told this is your sector number. And as soon as you go out to work, you say hello to the dispatcher. You say, good morning. I even remember the dispatcher's name was Mary. She was lovely. And I said, Mary, what's going on today? She said, well, I'm backed up 89 jobs in your sector. So I said, what 89? Are we doing?
How many police officers are in your sector?
Just myself and one other. So
and you have a list of 89 things to.
So she said, well, so she was holding 89 jobs, and she said, I guess I'll give you the most serious. Do you want personal injury, or do you want property, or do you want a call in progress? Because they're all equally as significant, right? Somebody has chest pains. There's an armed robbery in progress. Somebody is laying on the floor unconscious. So we say, well, I'm closest to this street. Right. Give me that. But they're all priority jobs. So you automatically become anxious thinking about, I have to get to help all those other calls. Wow. It's really a very, you need a high threshold for tolerance of many things when you're a police officer.
Yeah, look, I know about stress, and the things that I stress out about are certainly not life and death for the most part. So I can't imagine when you're operating at that level and everything is high priority, like you're saying. So, wow, what year was that? if you don't
My
mind?
gosh, that was in the mid 80s. So it was a long, long time ago.
But the city was, I ask really to say that the city was a much, much different place,
Oh,
right?
it was so different. Yes, it was
Yeah.
very, very different.
Yeah.
Before everything got cleaned up, if you will, right? So it was a great experience being a police officer in the city of New York. It was challenging. It was exciting. The experiences were unique. I don't think you could have them in any other occupation or vocation. And it's a very rewarding job in so many ways. You meet kids who see you as their role model, and you fast forward so many years into the future, and they come and they're standing before you in a uniform, and they tell you, I became a cop because of you, or so it's really a nice job where you could change lives in some ways.
So thank you for that. Yeah. So talk to me about some of, if you can, the programs that you're providing for these law enforcement officers. And then again, even if we could kind of bring that into COVID in the last couple of years, again, as we sit here, I mean, we are just past the 2-year anniversary of what was the lockdowns and the pandemic. I mean, I remember really it was like this is as we're recording, is the 22nd of 2022. And when we shut down the world, it was, I remember the 11th was a Wednesday, and the 13th of March was, was the way when the world shut down. So just the stress level for the first responders and others as well. Talk to me about that if you could.
So we originally brought post-truth processing to the world for law enforcement. We took it across the country, we demoed it, we beta tested it, and all of the law enforcement agencies that we showed it to, I think there were 82 in total, applauded, and they want it brought into their departments and agencies.
So what is it? Let's go back a second, because let's talk, what exactly is that deliverable that all these?
Okay, so we have a program where we train law enforcement officers to be peers. They go through formal training, and they run groups that help other officers process out what they're exposed to during shifts. So that was the original program. And we don't know where the officers are from. We've had officers from all over the country. So there's anonymity and therefore, confidentiality. It's an anonymous forum. So nobody knows who anybody is and where they're from. So it's the only program of its kind where it's truly anonymous.
So
there isn't anything else like it.
Yeah. So the organization provides a training. Now, is that with psychologists, you and Jean?
No. So there's different parts. So we have training that peers go through.
Okay.
So police officers, active and retired, get trained to facilitate the groups and process the group forward, and give other officers an opportunity to talk about what experiences they're bringing forward.
So can you talk to me? We're going to go to break in a second here, but in a few minutes, but let's talk to me about what stories can you share? I know obviously it's anonymous, but can you talk about some of the life-saving conversations that have gone on briefly?
We had an officer come in who had a very, very difficult day, and all of the people in the group were very supportive of this particular officer. The officers shared that they had a child that they were trying to get to the hospital, and the child didn't make it. And all the officer could think about was the guilt, the responsibility. What if this were their child? What went wrong? How could this child not have been brought to the hospital and survived, So they had a very, very difficult time, and they were very, very depressed. We later heard from this officer a couple of months later, and they said, "You literally saved my life." They saved their own life, because what we do in post-truth processing is whenever they need more than the peer who's facilitating the group and offering support in accordance with the other group members, they're brought to a mental health professional like Jean. And that mental health professional provides them with an assessment and a referral to ongoing therapy.
So they meet with their cohort, right? They meet with the people, and if it elevates to a certain level where they need further assistance, they'll then get connected with a mental health professional.
Yes, privately in a chat box, they're told how to contact the mental health professional. So
Wow.
they're the only one that knows that they're being
Right.
referred.
So when you say anonymous, is everyone off screen, or it's once they get in their group, they know who each other is?
Oh, no, only the peer is visible. They are truly anonymous. We had somebody come in once with a voice modulator, so even their voice was changed. But as I said, they're from all over the nation, so we wouldn't know who's who.
You wouldn't. Wow. Okay. All right. I can't even imagine the stories that go on and what happens and how you just talked about. Literally, tragically, we do see police officers take their own life. And
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, it's tragic. I mean, it's tragic in general when someone does that. But it goes to that mental health piece that I think we need to engage and we need to support. The second ever show I did here, Philanthropy and Focus, and I mentioned this a lot, was my friend Dr. Larry Grubler, who Robin and Gene might be a good fit as well. He runs an agency called Transitional Services for New York, TSINY. Wow. Yeah, they serve 4,000 individuals with mental health issues in the boroughs of New York City each year. But I can make that connection. But Larry said to me, Dr. Grubler, he said, Tommy, we all need support at times. And I always go back to that. And I say, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be compassionate, look out for each other. And your organization certainly does that. Gene, did you have something you want to jump in on before we go to a quick break?
I can hold it till after the break.
All right, we'll hold it. We'll come right back to you. Cirillo, attorney and therapist, is here. And I will do it with my hand. Robin Canariotto is here, and Tommy D is here. Philanthropy and Focus, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else included, the animals and everyone. We'll be right back. We're going to a quick break.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Every week on Philanthropy and Focus, we do a couple things. We bring on a leader of a nonprofit organization because nonprofits change our world, and law enforcement changes our world, and first responders change our world, and they often need support as well. And an organization called Post-Tour Processing is doing just that. Gene Cirillo, Robin Canariotto are here. Gene, you were going to make a point right before the break, so jump in. Let's talk.
Yes, I was going to say that the legal aspects of the anonymity are very important, because a lot of times in mental health counseling, if somebody goes to the EAP or to a police counselor, they have an obligation to the department. That's their first obligation, the department and the general public. And if somebody talks about being suicidal or having rage that they have trouble controlling or anxiety, sometimes the counselor there would feel a duty to report it or to force them to go ahead for further counseling, which is counterproductive. So with the anonymity and with the confidentiality that people who work with us, even in our referral counseling program, we're not going to give out this information to anybody. You know, they're treated like any other patient. Confidentiality comes first. In the group, you're not in a situation with the anonymity where anybody would even have access to where you're from and your name, and like Robin said, they could even use a voice modulator.
So they're protected. So they're protected.
They're protected.
Again,
they're shielded. Yes.
Shielded. Perfect word, right? So they're shielded, and another layer of protection, because the alternative would be discouraging to come forward and get involved and have these types of conversations, right?
Yes, and the police are very quick to bring their kids in when they had learning disabilities. You know, I was training as a graduate student in the 80s, and I think we had a little group of 5 kids. 3 of them were the children of police officers. So they're very willing to say, my child has a behavior problem or a learning disability, I'm going to take them in for counseling. But to actually say, I, as a police officer, am having trouble controlling my temper at home or adjusting at work, I'm anxious, you know, they have nowhere where they could really feel free disclosing it until recently, when Robin started this program, when more programs like these that were sure to maintain the anonymity and confidentiality were put in place. So that was the beginning.
So it's not even just in my own misconception of the pride or the ego of the whole thing. It's also, this is their job security, to the earlier point you're making there. And if I don't have a program like this, and I do go to the EAP, employee assistance program, through my job or whatever it is, that's out there now, right? Through this program, it isn't. So it's a game changer.
And there are people that go there to be peer resorts. So even if somebody, let's say if they could tell by your voice, if you weren't using a voice modulator, which you can do, women could be men or vice versa. With something like that, the idea is, even if they knew who it was, a lot of times you're not there because of your problem in particular. You might have come for your problem, but then you stick around as a resource person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We learned during the pandemic that when we opened groups up to physicians, nurses, EMTs, firemen, paramedics, we learned that they needed the help the same way officers did, law enforcement officers. So all first responders benefit from this program. Being a first responder, you never know what you're going to encounter during your shift. And having the support of your peers allows you to draw from their experiences and how they survived and how they went forward.
So what about COVID? What sort of changed as far as, was there more need for this? I mean, not that I think there, again, when I talk about that, your mission and how the volume of exposure that law enforcement officers are faced with, how did that change? I mean, I'll just put this out there. I have a lot of friends who are New York City firemen. And I remember
my dad was the New York City fire captain. Right. So yeah.
Thank you for his service, for sure. So I remember in talking early COVID, early March, April of COVID. I remember them, what we were hearing was that if a young middle-aged person had a heart attack, the FDNY could work on him for a little while and then had to move on. And they would call, the deceased on the spot, where they would have put in a lot more time and effort, but they could not, just because of the volume of what was going on, and EMTs, with FDNY, the whole thing. So, I mean, that even sounds like more tragic that they have to, aside from what we all saw here in New York City with what COVID was like, and it had to just bring up even more challenge for these folks. Is that right?
Yes, it was significantly more challenging. I had physicians come in and talk about how they, bodies were put on trucks And I mean, we heard this on the news, but to hear it from the people who actually saw it and dealt with it daily, it was really devastating to them.
So yeah, I remember, and again, we saw that, the freezer trucks outside of the hospitals here in New York and things, just tragic. And again, watching it on the news is one thing, living it is completely different. So talk to me a little bit about, either during COVID or as a result of and going forward, that the organization would serve others other than just the law enforcement people. I remember the doctors and nurses, what they were going through. How does this apply? I think it seems like it's the same sort of conversations that can be going on, or similar conversations amongst peers.
I remember a new physician sharing that she was afraid to talk to anybody about what she experienced. And she shared with the doctor facilitating the group, because like in kinds, we had physicians run physician groups and nurses run nursing groups, and across the board it was that way. But this young doctor said that when she graduated, she could have never imagined seeing life and death so many times in the same shift as she did her first day working as a physician with COVID. They actually graduated them early to allow the med students to go and help, the graduates, the doctors, the new doctors, to go and help with the COVID pandemic. So it was like a physician who was working on a MASH unit, in a military zone where death was so constant. It was really devastating to them.
You said on the first day that you got a call about somebody that had fallen between subway cars, and they didn't want you there because they felt that you wouldn't be able to handle it at that point, knowing you were a new police officer. And this is a daily occurrence.
Right. So it's similar. Yes.
That was on your first tour?
On my first tour. So very often people fall between the cars in New York City. And when you see that the first time as a cop, it's really quite an experience, because you want to help the person, but there isn't really anything you could do.
I know. I've heard that. That's tragic. What about this program and how it goes national? Back to a segment earlier, you were talking about 80 some odd departments and organizations wanted to be involved with this. Does the organization even have the bandwidth? And this will lead into what I like to say is, what do you need? And I was on your website, and I know what most of my organizations, on your website, it says pay it forward is the link where you can make a donation and support the organization. But how big can this get? And
I love that question, because that's really our dream, is designing this organization. So we self-sustain to date. This has been a 5-year journey so far, almost 5 years. And myself and the guys that developed this with me, some are active, some are retired. They're all professionals. They're all sweethearts, and they care more than anybody else I could think of, besides people like Jean, who align with us and help us, the doctors and the therapists that are there helping us help this population. It's the technology. The cost of technology is expensive. We have one paid employee who he's actually an independent contractor who, helps us sustain the technology. And then we have a computer architect who constantly helps us develop and stay current and scale what it is that we're doing. So we cannot sustain any more than we are, and we could barely do what we're doing, to be honest with you. I don't know how we're doing it. That's the truth. So at this point in the organization's development, we are beginning to fundraise so that we can take this across the nation and across populations, because this program is designed for anybody in a high-risk occupation. So as we grow, we hope to grow in service other professions too.
So if you had to put your finger on types of companies or businesses that would really best align with your mission, have you, and we don't have to do it now, and it could be something you and I take away on a subsequent conversation, Robin, but are there certain organizations or even differently, municipalities that have this have capacity and access to monies that could support the programs you're doing, because obviously you're making a real impact.
So we're not business people, and that's our shortcoming, but we have a business person who reached out to help us with business development, Tom Sweeney.
Okay.
Another person, Walter Sanchez, he is a journalist.
I know Walter. I saw Walter last week at the Queen's Chamber, St. Patrick's. I know Walter. I know his son John as well. Sure.
I know his son Thomas also, who just became a doctor. He matched last week. He'll be working at Queen's Presbyterian Hospital. I'm very proud of him. I will see Walter this Thursday. So people like that help us identify what we need to do and who we need to be aligned with. To answer your question, really, the best way I could depict for you who would benefit from us and who realizes it. Prior to the pandemic, we had 6 police departments reach out to us to license our program. And, this is, I can't believe this, but the Capitol Police, the police in Minnesota, the police in Chicago, and other places where there were needs, imminent needs, we subsequently saw, where there were situations that took place that were life-changing for many people. They recognized that this program would be beneficial. We have not gone back to them yet to say, okay, would you like to license this? But that's one of our goals in the future, to license this program.
So license the program. Okay, so I think while not infinite, there's certainly a way, way big market that you can capitalize on.
We're patented. We got a patent last year. We're very proud of that. It was quite an experience to write a patent paper and to draw the diagrams and to try to depict what this process was. But when the government received our application, they gave us a patent for it. So there is a need.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, of course. That's incredible. I think we need to get you, we're going to go to break now, but I think we need to get you connected to the Queen's Chamber of Commerce, which Robin, you and I might have talked about, but Tom Gretsch is a friend of ours. He's the CEO. The vocalist who you hear singing my theme song is my buddy Brendan Levy, who's over there at the Queen's Chamber as well.
How nice.
Yeah, he runs business development. So we got to get you connected to the chambers. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a nonprofit committee that I'm involved with, which is part of the chamber. So we'll talk about that offline. When we come back for the final segment of the show, what I want to do is I want to talk about, what you need, who you like, even deeper, who you think we can connect you with if you have somebody on your list. And then what's the future of this organization, and anything you want to share, Robin or Jean, we'll do the lightning round when we come back. All right.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be right back. Philanthropy.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. Cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Every Friday morning, I bring you another leader of a nonprofit organization. I want to read you this. The website is ttmpt.com. And here's the mission of this organization one more time. I read some of it to you before, but just because your tour has ended doesn't mean it's over. Police officers can be exposed to more traumas in a single tour than most civilians experience in a lifetime. Left unattended, the tension and stress that result from being bombarded by these traumas can have devastating effects. This can lead to difficulties with personal relationships, alcoholism, suicidal thoughts, and unintentional overreactions on the job. Our program, their program of this organization, our program offering anonymity, confidentiality, and security is a comprehensive plan for early identification and remediation of critical stress in law enforcement personnel, specifically designed to eliminate and reduce future instances of adversarial contacts and restore positive relations among law enforcement officers and the communities that they serve. I don't know any greater mission than what you all are doing. These are the folks who protect and serve our communities, and we need to support and protect and serve those individuals as well. So let's do what we call, or I like to call, the lightning round. Let's make sure we get everything you wanted to say in before we move on. So Jean, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. So Jean, what else is on your mind, please?
I wanted to say something about how what happens with trauma, it's not only mental and emotional, it's also physical. It gets stuck in the brain. When you go through a traumatic experience, which the police go through, unfortunately, potentially every day, what happens is you form certain connections in your brain. The neurotransmitters get stuck in a certain loop so that if you see something that reminds you of that, like a loud noise, you're likely to overreact. In the past, you just had to learn to live with it. There wasn't a real treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. Now there are several treatments along with medication, which doesn't have to be the kind that would impair you from working, but just that would help rebalance the neurotransmitters from what you've gone through. There's plenty of therapy, and that's where it can go from the peer group to a referral for somebody who needs more to process this trauma.
There's only so much we can handle, right? Like this human being, there's only so much like that we can take in. And I, as I said earlier, and don't make a joke about it, I battle with stress and sometimes mental health issues personally, right? So like, and I don't get exposed to the things that these first responders are exposed to. So many of us are dealing with stress, and put COVID in the mix, and now an international war and all these things are going on in this time in history. But when you have that, again, I'll use the word, I've used it several times, the volume that's coming at these individuals, the fact that you're using words like neurotransmitter. I love this guy, Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I love where he talks about creating new pathways and stuff like that. Gene.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Those pathways, they evolve. We evolved from animals where they create that kind of fight or flight or freeze pathway, and it's productive for living in that environment, and it might be productive for living on the streets as a police officer, but it's not so productive for reintegrating into society or for bringing home to your family. The therapies that are available today can help you deal with that.
That's awesome. And the fact that you just used, and I wrote it down, but you just said PTSD, you said post-traumatic stress disorder. You're referring to on-the-job stuff that changes the situation and changes the reality, correct me if I'm wrong, for these individuals. Yeah.
It started, PTSD as a concept started with dealing with Vietnam veterans who could not reintegrate into society years later. They used to call it shell shock after the world wars. So it's a different term, but it's the same thing.
But it's the same thing, right? Yeah. Robin.
So sometimes we see a story in the news about an officer who makes a mistake, a mistake. How could you possibly choose the wrong piece of equipment? How could you go down the street the wrong way? How could you have made such a mistake? But there's no opportunity to really unload themselves with everything previous that they've experienced. So when you're on overload, if there's PTSD as part of the overload, anything is possible in terms of how they would react to a situation.
And look, you're asking for split-second decisions to begin with, right? You're talking life and death decisions in an instant, and then now that's tough straight up. Then you head on maybe years or decades of this trauma, that's been
exposure,
again,
constant exposure, daily exposure.
Oh my God.
There has to be a program available, which we believe we've developed, to allow officers to support each other and share their experiences from what they're exposed to, and allow them to unburden themselves and really dispense some of it from their mind. If you lived with your garbage and never threw it out, what would it be like to live in that house, right?
Yeah, pretty stinky. Yeah.
You couldn't survive it eventually, right? There wouldn't be room.
But that's what it is. And again, just to kind of throw it out there, I know a bit about addiction, and when we're in pain, sometimes we will go to things that make us numb and make the pain go away. So a lot of this stuff, at least in my experience in life, gets wound up. The abuse of drugs and or alcohol, sometimes is used. And I'm not saying by police officers, I'm saying general public, we use different things to sort of get through. And that just, as we know from being a little kid and watching those after school movies, the problems just get worse by covering them up with the drink and with drugs, right? We know that.
And police officers turn to alcohol. It's no secret. I often see programs for veterans, and they're well-deserved, and they're needed, and they're necessary, and there will never be enough programs for anybody who's provided service to the country and has done a job that most people couldn't imagine doing. But a police officer does that every day. They're just there amongst us, and we don't realize really that they went to war during the day.
All day long,
right? So I mean, they'll, some of the job is helping, but during their shift, they experience things that nobody really could understand except they understand each other. Yeah. So I feel like we have an obligation to support them and to take care of them and to, protect and serve them in some way. We have Sheriff Timothy Whitcomb with us, and he says, protect and serve those who protect and serve. And
protect and serve those who protect and serve.
And I love when he says it every time he says.
Who was that? Timothy
Whitcomb. Timothy Whitcomb.
Yeah, so good to meet you. Oh, I hope to meet you soon. I will, because we're going to do some stuff together. We actually are going to have to leave it there because we are out of time, which I promised you we'd run out of time, because that's how it works. We run out of time on the show, and then when you come back, we do another show, or I'll come out, we'll do an event together, whatever it might be. Gene Cirillo, thank you for being here. Attorney, psychotherapist, and Robin's partner in practice. And then since 2000, so that's a long time, right? So you guys have been a long time. Robin Canariotto, who I joked about your last name. I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship. Thanks to my buddy Mike. I don't want to just put your
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Thank you to Sam Leibowitz for making this happen and staying in my corner long enough for me to finally get this show going back last year, January of 21. Everybody have a great day. To find me, you go to TommyD.NYC on Instagram and TikTok. TommyD at Philanthropy and Phocus, PHOCUS.com is the email address. Everybody have a great day.
Tommy, thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.